And speaking of amazing, we have some great panelists here with us this morning. And speaking of amazing, all of you all for being here at 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So hats off to you. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves one by one, share with us a few words about what they do. We'll start right here and take it down the line.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jelie, also known as Bradley in some places. I am a artist, producer, engineer, and I do a bunch of stuff on I don't know. I can't pick what I want to do, so I just do everything. I'll let you go next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Johannes Larson, or Hans for short. I'm a recent graduate from Georgetown University. I'm a drummer, and I'm a music advocate, and I run a nonprofit that does research and advocacy work around music streaming and digital music economics.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucinda Kearney. I lead strategy and business development for a company called Jukebox, spelled JKBX. And we are a platform that is creating the first ever stock exchange that allows retail investors to buy, trade, sell securities of songs. So essentially creating songs into investable assets.
Awesome. Good morning. My name is Michael Bracy. I've been incredibly fortunate to work at the intersection of music and public policy and ecosystems for about 25 years, and I'm here in my role as the Senior Advisor to Youth on Record, and just thrilled to see you all here today. Thanks for coming out.
25 years. He started when he was 5. Good entry into the music business. So we're going to start off with the toughest question, perhaps. We're going to be talking about the future, and we're going to talk about the present in that context, but I'm going to ask the panelists one by one to get out their crystal ball. If you need a crystal ball, got one right here. But tell us, make a prediction over the next 5 years. What's going to be something significant you think that will happen in tech, music tech specifically? So 5 years, what do you think? Who wants to take it first?
I guess I can go first.
They all know this, yeah.
This is very much a hope, but my hope for the next 5 years is that we see a large-scale competitor to current major streaming platforms, and a competitor that pays artists more fairly and pays rights holders more fairly. In addition to that, I'd like to see more artists to continue to own the rights to their own music so that they can monetize it more efficiently. And these are all hopes, right? These would all take a lot of work. So yeah, that's yeah.
Hopes work. Okay. What is it Yogi Berra said about the predictions? Anyway, I'm failing here. It's hard to tell the future. It's hard to make predictions, especially when it's about the future.
There you go.
There we go. So hopes work. Okay. All right. Who else?
All right. My prediction for the next 5 years, specifically with tech in the music industry, is that in, let's say, the last 3 years, we've really seen a surge in user-generated content, or UGC. And I think that the way we've seen people interact with music has started to change, in that streaming and typical platforms that you think about engaging with music really are now, while they're still the dominant force of how we interact with music, it's much more stagnant when trends and TikToks and memes and songs and audio clips are becoming the way that people interact with music in this day and age. And I think when you pair user-generated content and the continual acceleration of user-generated content with new technology in the music space, like platforms like Suno and other AI generators of music content, I think in the next 5 years, we're gonna see the two of those forces combined, and you're gonna see this type of user-generated music that is highly customizable, highly relevant to people's individual days, experiences, thoughts. And if you can create music with an AI prompt in less than 5 minutes and put it as the audio of your TikTok, I think that we're gonna see that blend of user-generated content for any type of social media, blending with AI content with music. And I think that that's where the music industry is going in 5 years.
All right. Terrifying. Jelie, you want to go?
I lost my train of thought because everything was so on point. Come back to me.
So that was amazing. And Hans, I love your vision. And I'm going to take I'm going to take it in a little bit of a different direction because I think that there's a fundamental, when we think about music, we often think about the music industry, which is really about, what are the economic structures, and that's a lot of what we're talking about in today's session. We also need to lift up and think about what is actually the role of music as it relates to humanity and why music exists. And the sort of, we're sort of at the tail end of, 100 years of commoditization of music and sort of building economic structures around how can music make money for different entities, which in our current economic model is fundamentally publicly traded corporations that are, seeing how they can maximize their shareholder value because that's what they do. And that is butting up against sort of, again, how do we as human beings connect to music, a lot of what we're doing this week at UMS, which has an economic impact, but fundamentally is different. And so the thing I'm looking for in the next 5 years is tech adjacent, in that I think we're accelerating the sort of conversation about what does structural market failure look like, and what are the intermediaries that connect us as human beings and fans of music with that art. And so a lot of it is going to be through exactly what Lucinda described, but also it's going to be through the infrastructure that we heard from yesterday, like the drop and Indie 102.3, and the individuals who have that ability to help curate and connect fans and listeners with artists they need to know about. And so I'm really looking for, what is the technology that's going to be built and is going to be deployed that fans are going to be able to use to sort of have those connection points, especially in a world, which again it's a totally transformational world for people who are Storms in my age, to think that we have global distribution with the click of a finger, and the entire, you all are the first generation that grew up with the entire history of recorded music, in your pocket, on demand, on the phone. So these are transformative ideas. Now the question is, what's the infrastructure that's going to make the music side of it work beyond just the economics of it?
I agree with that. I think we'll continue to push the bounds of creativity in the entertainment industry in general, not just music, but also film, and we see what's happening with visual art and all of the Dolly models and the night cafes and all of these things. So, there's only so much that everything that has already been imagined is probably what our AI has been trained on. So it's going to force us to be more original so that we can give it something else to create. I would also say it'll force us to be more creative in the ways that we explore ways to get paid. All of the easy jobs are going to be pretty much automated if they haven't already, which could be like music and TV, the little music you hear in the snippets before the news segments go in and out. All of that stuff could easily be replaced, but I also think it'll put musicians and creators overall in a better place to be working with people who value them. I think it'll cut out the stress of working with someone who doesn't understand how much work it takes to create something original. If they do want that, prompt-based music from AI, then they can go get that. But I think we all know so far when the human touch is missing. I will say that it might get murky in the future to be able to tell if something is AI generated or not. But I think the fact that things do have to be tagged, whether or not they are AI generated or not, will hopefully allow us to at least know what we're supporting.
Very well put. I really appreciate all you guys' projections. We're going to record this, as you know, and we're going to play it back in 5 years, see how you did. Then you can buy your lottery number. But anyway, several of you pointed to distribution, specifically more recent emerging distribution models, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what's going on with distribution specifically. And Hans, if you don't mind, I'll start with you because I think that's in your wheelhouse, and in a lane you're driving in right now. Can you share your thoughts on that?
I think that the part of the promise of the shift to digital music is that we would no longer need distribution gatekeepers in the same way that we did pre-streaming. I think that was, and I think we're kind of going back to a slightly gate-kept model where you need to rely on distributors to have your music across multiple different platforms. I think if recorded music was dependable, artists might not need distributors in the same way. Obviously, distributing to non-streaming platforms is one thing, but I'd like to see a future of distribution where artists are fully in control of it. Yeah.
Other thoughts? Distribution. What are you thinking? TikTok,
Yeah.
that's it, right? The other one.
Well, I think just to build on what Hans is saying, I mean, again, if we think about, the traditional role of distribution, and we think about, again, a pre-digital model, why did this infrastructure exist? Is because there was limited access to recording studios. You had to physically press vinyl or CDs. You had to figure out a supply chain to get them on trucks and planes and into record stores. And you had this whole sort of thing that was beyond, the economic scale of virtually any musician, right? I mean, you needed to have this sort of business alignment. And then you also had the other things that distribution partners would give you in terms of expertise in branding and credibility and strategy and all that. Well, now that, again, that the economics have shifted, that you don't need those things anymore. They're nice. You're going to want to have physical product and the rest of it. But you have, as an artist, you have a fundamentally different sort of relationship to what do you need? What is your team? What is your squad? What do you need around you? So I think we're in a moment where this is still settling in because, again, the economics, as I said before, are driven by how can the folks looking to sort of maximize their return for investors and for shareholders, they're trying to figure out how do you replicate that bottleneck system so they can get the friction so they can maximize their revenue. And I think it's exhausting, I think, for artists who, again, have the benefit of the imagination that they can be in the marketplace, right? So again, our generation, that was a pipe dream for most people who are like, I can make a record, I can get it signed, I can be, that was very, very few people could do that. Now, when you're coming into the industry or into the community with knowing that that's not a burden, the challenge is how then do I make enough money and find enough revenue streams that I can actually make this be my job, or this can be a piece of what I do. And what I'm seeing, which I think is fascinating, and I want to hear from this room, and I want to hear from you guys more and more, and Jelie, I love your take on this. I'm hearing more and more artists aren't even trying to monetize their intellectual property. They're like, I'm going to make money through brand deals. I'll make money through, other opportunities that I can get known. I can have a fan base and a following and a community around me, and that's where I'm going to get paid. And if I can't figure out how to make it off of streams or off of, monetizing my publishing, I mean, if I can, that's great. But I'm not even in that game, which I think is scary and terrifying, sort of. Like, that's not success, I don't feel like.
Yeah. July.
I have a theory on the tech side of things, and maybe I'm giving somebody something to invent. I feel like there will be a distribution aggregate of some sort that will encompass all of the platforms that exist, including the platforms that are coming in the future. And maybe you pay a monthly fee to access everything. That'd be Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, all of the different platforms someone could release their music on, even going back to SoundCloud, and even including Bandcamp, which is often an independent route people go to release their music and have more control over how much they get paid. I think we might see all of these different avenues in one place so that when you look up an artist, their music shows up, and all of the different ways that people might distribute, even if it is like, a bunch of apps. I know that everybody isn't going to want to have 300 apps for every artist that they listen to on their phone. So that's going to kind of become obsolete. And I know a lot of artists have apps and have great, entirely big fan bases on those apps and have found ways to get their fans in one place that is off of social media, where you'd have to boost a post or pay to get on a playlist or hope the algorithm picks you up. I do think we'll find a way to do these things more organically through AI based on listening habits and things that you usually like. I think it'll be able to recommend music that isn't necessarily gate-kept, which has been discussed up here as well.
To your point, Michael, about the branding and the artist these days has so much to worry about in this. So July, I like how you mentioned that there is the brand weight, but there's the bandwidth that they have to manage all of these things. And that's what you all probably are most relating to understanding how you balance those things, how you learn it, how you keep up with the many changes that we're talking about here this morning. So thank you for your thoughts on that. Let's talk about ownership, especially, as we think about the blockchain and Web3. What happens to, with this technology, what happens to artist ownership? And again, I'll open this up to anyone.
I think, so first, to answer that question, but also touching a little bit about what you were talking about, Michael, on where are the metrics of success and how am I getting paid as an artist, right? And I think that where your income is coming from as an artist is also, to your point, gonna really dictate the type of music you create or the type of album you put out or how many albums you put out or whether or not you're putting out music for a brand deal and to grow your audience on TikTok or whether or not you're putting it out because this is truly who you are and the expression of your creativity as an artist. I think that the ownership side of things, I'll let somebody else go into the blockchain side of things. I have some thoughts there. I think it's really interesting to think about that when you're looking at the crystal ball of where that technology goes in 5 years. But the ownership side of things has really evolved because we're even seeing on the major label side, folks are doing licensing deals, right? That it's licensed back to majors and that they actually own copyrights, and that's becoming more and more common. I would even maybe go as far to say right now the norm with major label deals, that they're licensed deals rather than full ownership deals with the majors. So I think that that's a really positive shift that we've seen in the past couple of years and seeing that evolve. The other thing I would say on ownership that falls more into the realm of jukebox is really where we see the future, which is that the ownership can be not only for the artist, but also back to the fans. So when you think about actually owning the music that you're listening to, it's a really interesting concept that I don't think has been cracked in the past, of actually selling your music not to private equity, or when you see folks like Justin Bieber selling his catalog, Katy Perry selling his catalog. What's the one right now for $1 billion? Yeah. Queen? Probably. But actually selling your music and selling your rights back to the fans and the folks that made it popular to begin with. And I think that that's a really powerful dynamic when you can have not only just one private equity company that owns your entire catalog, but what if you had 1 million fans that owned 1/1,000,000th of the songs that they're listening to every day?
There are definitely pros and cons to that. I think that ownership has been made an incentive, and not just for the creator, but we obviously know it's made an incentive for business purposes, the people that are investing in the art, and then as the people who want to be like the bank, like a label, and then the people that are investing in the art because they support it and they listen to it. And the ownership as an incentive to get people to invest in my art so that I can reach more people and be seen, and ownership as an incentive so that they'll listen to me and support me because they get a piece. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. So I think it will be a grapple for not all artists, because a lot of artists, like you said, have been selling their catalogs for the quick turnaround, or just because they don't want to deal with it. I don't know. I couldn't answer for them. But the catalog itself just being outsourced and just not even yours, because it makes more sense to, as we were saying earlier, monetize other things. As we know that with streaming being a thing, it's really hard to make people want to pay for these things in the first place. So I think it'll continue to be kind of rocky I don't know that there'll ever be one answer. I think everybody will always do what feels most comfortable for them.
Awesome. Well, let's get to the topic that is probably on most people's minds and certainly makes the news hourly. There's probably been a new development in AI since we've been on stage this morning. A couple of you have referred to it, but thoughts on AI?
Big question.
Yeah,
Sure,
I know.
yeah. Many thoughts. The ones I will share now on this panel are, so first of all, I think it's important to be, I think that there's a lot that's exciting, and I think that there's a lot that is provocative and interesting, and I think it's very incumbent on all of us as music stakeholders to embrace the conversation, engage with it as early as possible, and not run away from it, right? And I think, again, my role, I think, a little bit in this conversation today is to think about what can we learn from what my generation, what we should have done differently when we were faced with similar transitions at the turn of the century, right? So when we went from being an analog to a digital industry, there was a huge chunk of businesses and individuals and stakeholders that did not want to engage in the reality of the situation, that there are certain things that were going to happen. There are certain things that were just going to transform the way music is created and recorded and distributed, and we can go to the high dive and have a late night conversation about it, if that's good, bad, or whatever, but the fact is, the reality is, you got to be grounded in what is going to happen. Certain things are going to happen. And so if you ignore that when you think about sort of AI and don't think about how the technology aligns with the vision and values and the purpose and why people are, again, the humanity of music that we talked about earlier, then you're taking yourself out of the game and you're not there. That said, what I want this generation to understand, and we talk about constantly, is that what's going to happen with the legal and regulatory framework that allows AI to go into the marketplace and develop is going to be a function of decisions that are made by human beings. And those decisions are going to be made mostly in Congress and in regulatory agencies and in the courts by people who are being given sort of arguments and sort of frameworks for what decisions they would like to have made. And if you look again at the history of the transition of the digital music industry, or the creation of that industry, again, those decisions are by and large were driven by economic interests that did not center the artist and the creator in that conversation. So we've been involved in them, and we've been at the table, and we're sort of in that mix a little bit, but fundamentally, the way our governance and legal structures work, they are driven by who has the economic power to drive that towards their economic means and their goals. So we need stat, right? So it's so urgent that as we think about the next decade of where the AI policymaking structure and the rules of the road are going to be developed, that your generation needs to be engaging in that. And we can't have the analog generation tell your generation what we think AI should look like. That's the last thing we need. We need your generation to feel empowered and understand you have agency, and a not only an opportunity, but I would argue an obligation to figure out what are the entry points that your generation can figure out what you want this to look like, and you're driving it. Because otherwise, we are in a lot of trouble. So I'll leave it at that.
We are in a lot of trouble. Yeah. It's interesting that you pointed out. Yeah, Michael and I have seen our share of disruptions in this music industry, and that familiar pattern of who jumps in to try to solve the problem, but it needs to come from all of you in this room and all of us on stage here, ideally. Yes, anyone else?
I love what you said there, and I do think that it's urgent, and that it should be maybe not only on the younger generation, but learning also from the past and those disruptions that you've seen, especially at the turn of the century. I actually am curious to ask a question if I can. I know I'm not the moderator
You are,
here,
certainly.
but I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts, because looking back to the turn of the century when we went digital, I think a lot of people would agree that a big transfer that happened was lowering the barrier of entry of what it means to be a musician and what it means to be a recorded musician, right? When you can upload, and even in today's day and age when you can upload to almost every single streaming service at the touch of the button and have global distribution, and you can record an entire album in your basement, well then what does it mean to be a musician? And I think with AI now, we are likely going to see that that barrier of entry is going to get lowered again. And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And do you agree with that, not agree with that?
I've got takes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think it will lower the barrier to entry, similar how streaming did. But I think the biggest risk is that, similar to other technological shifts over the past 20 to 40 to 60 years, the biggest risk of AI is that it will be used to extract more value from independent musicians and recording musicians, both at the grassroots level but also at the major label level. Right now, just a recent development in the past week is that a lot of artists have noticed AI-generated tracks on Spotify-made playlists. So you'll go and search up a country song cover, right? And instead of the most popular cover of that song, it'll be an AI cover that comes up. And they have like 300,000 streams. It's a scam, whether it's perpetrated by Spotify or others, remains up in the air. But I think that is the biggest risk, is that it will be used to give consumers the type of music they want to hear, and without giving any of that back to the artists, or the rights holders even, for that matter.
Any other thoughts?
I think if anybody could put paint on a canvas, that doesn't mean that it's going to be a Picasso or that it's going to go to a gallery. I think if someone wants to create, even through AI, then they should have the freedom to create. I think that is a human right to be able to access technology. I think everyone should be able to. As far as the barrier to entry, it being easier for people to get through, and even unethical things like, AI-generated songs being the top covers, I just think people are going to support what they want to support. If they want that human connection, then they'll make sure to listen to a human cover. And if not, maybe the AI version has some real earworms in it, and they just love that version. But I don't think we'll fully be able to control everyone unless the government, starts to filter things, which of course they already have. So I'm not sure it's completely up to us at this point.
So I'm going to take it in a tiny bit of a different direction, in that, part of the transformation of the music economy over the last 30 years has really been an evolution from a very sort of orderly industry in the terms of, like, what does an industry mean, businesses, into something that's very different. I had this epiphany last summer. I took my daughters to go see Boy Genius at Meriwether Post Pavilion, and it hit me in a way that I hadn't been hit by a concert in a long time. There's something happening there, and I was trying to figure out, like, what was this thing? Like, why did this connect with me so hard? And it made me think of when I was a kid, and when I was 17, I saw the band U2 at Capitol Center outside DC. And they're still earlier in their career, and they're growing, and that band at that time in the 1980s was, like, incredibly meaningful. And it's like, you can be in a room with 17,000 people and you're singing political songs, everybody's on the same team, and it's all exciting and energetic and cathartic and beautiful and meow, meow, meow. But what I realized just in thinking about that is that old economy was really based on content and consumers. And for all the performative stuff that U2 was doing, U2 was not building a movement, they were building a brand. And they were monetizing that brand, which they've done successfully for the last 40 years, including going to Vegas, right, and going to the Sphere. But what your generation is doing is fundamentally different, because you are not just consumers that are like, oh yeah, there's a product on stage. You are creators. You're actively engaged in that. You're filmmakers, you're podcasters, you're DJs, you're promoters. You're in it in a fundamentally different way. And that makes me extraordinarily helpful in stuff we're seeing again this week at UMS, that all these major macro structural things are happening, and they're not necessarily music things. They are, late stage capitalism things, right? I mean, there's a lot going on, but we have the ability and are seeing the ability to self-organize our communities, the ability to, find our audiences, the ability to get the music out there, the ability to sort of recognize that, a lot of people are going to be sort of down this AI algorithm path, and that's going to be their experience with music, but that doesn't have to be our experience with music. So I go back to this thing I said at the beginning. If we can be smart about the core infrastructure needs that we have, that we need to be able to make and produce and find and access the stuff that our communities want and that we want and that we need, it's not that the AI algorithm stuff is irrelevant, but it's secondary to us making sure that we are very clear-eyed about what are our core, kind of infrastructure needs, and that we are getting that taken care of. And the rest is going to be cynical and scary and weird, but it's not going to stop us from doing what we want to do.
Cynical, scary, weird.
The Michael Bracy
Great.
story.
There you go. There you go. That's the T-shirt for today. So I'm going to give you a little storm warning. We want this to be a conversation. We want to know what your questions are. We've covered a lot of stuff here. I know it's been sinking in, but before we get to your questions, I'm going to ask the panelists one more request, I guess, more than a question. We've got a group of folks here. As Michael has put it, this generation has a lot to think about, and I would like you to share a piece of advice. Maybe in the context of our conversation, what advice do you have for these folks, and maybe even something they could do? What's an action we could take here from this conversation? Whoever wants to jump in. Advice?
Yeah, I have one that comes to mind right away, and this is from an experience I just had last week. And I think working in the music industry, whether you are an artist, a producer, a entrepreneur, any part of the music industry, I think that we're all in this industry not because it's easy, because we love it, right? And it can be hard sometimes to remember that when it is hard and cynical and weird and all of those things. And my piece of advice would be intentionally seek those moments, whether it's a concert with Boy Genius. I can absolutely say that that would refill my music cup 100%. Recently, I got to see a really cool, intimate performance of one of my favorite artists, and it just brought me back to why I do what I do and why it's important, the work that we're all doing. And so while it can be tough at times, I think it's important to remember to do whatever that is for you. Maybe it's live music, maybe it's writing and forgetting about posting on social media, but just writing again. But make sure that you're intentional about doing the things that remind you why you're in this industry.
All right, thank you.
I can go next. The only way that these issues are going to change is if we collectively build better structures together. It's easy to have a competitive mindset, especially when you're competing against other artists for performance opportunities or other career opportunities. But one thing that's so great about this festival is that we support each other and the artists support each other, and you see the strength of that here through this conference and also throughout the weekend. And so continuing to do that and continuing to look out for each other and to advocate not only for yourself but for your fellow musicians is my advice.
All right, thank you.
I would say be clear on what your measurement of success is. It might not be how many views you get, how many plays you get. It might be based on how many views you got or how many plays you got. How long did they listen? How long did they watch? Did they engage with you after? How can you engage with them? Rather than vanity numbers that are just a cloak and can be easily faked, I would say just focus on the interactions as a part of whatever you measure for your success.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
And I would suggest, being, to the extent that you have bandwidth and interest, being willing to sort of, play that part as an advocate for your own community and not just be passive and say this is just the way it is, because we have the opportunity, again, to create better futures. I think one way we think about that specifically is that there's plenty of money in this country, right? Money is not the problem. The question is who gets the money. And we think about all of the economic activity that is generated based on the back of music. and on the back of live performance, that doesn't get reflected back into how musicians get paid and sort of those things. And so, you know, I was really inspired yesterday by Colorado Business Coalition for the Arts, the work that they're doing to help sort of go to the state capitol and try to get additional funding for programs, for infrastructure, for stuff we're talking about today. So being willing to engage in those sort of advocacy fights through the organizations that are doing that hard work every day, I'd really recommend.
Awesome. Sage advice from our panelists. Let's hear from you all, and you know, any question you might have, meaning of life, whatever. GB's got a microphone there. We appreciate you using that. Questions or comments?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, with AI, I know you're saying to look to us to make those new entryways and come up with the new ideas. When the streaming era was happening and that transition, obviously there's some people that got ahead of that and some people that kind of got stuck in sitting where they were. And I didn't know if you had any advice on how to jump ahead of that, if it's just being aware of AI and using it and learning it. And Jelie, I know you were talking about your use of it in the Boomy masterclass, but if you're just wanting to continue to create music for yourself or the people that listen to it, not necessarily in like a financial way of trying to make songs for sync or branding, and just authentically make music, how would you suggest getting ahead of that and being involved in it still?
Good question.
I think you answered your own question. If you want to create for yourself, continue to create for yourself and don't worry about the outside pressures of what other people are doing with their music if they do want, you know, that spotlight outside of their friend group.
I would add one thing to that. If you want to create entirely yourself and not use AI through your creation, I think that's great. Continue to do that. How you get ahead of that is by leveraging AI through other areas that are not your strong suit, because it unfortunately is the reality we live in, that as an independent artist, you are also your own manager for a while, or you're also your own booker, or you're your own social media promoter. And AI can be extremely helpful with making your time the most effective so that you can do all of those things and not have to focus as much time and energy at being an expert in those areas, and then actually putting more of your time and attention to the thing that you want to do, which is create and write music.
Yeah, it's
Awesome,
definitely
thank you.
easier to be a hobbyist, and you know, like you were saying, if you don't want to create the cover art, maybe you put in a prompt to create the cover art, but you made your own song, you recorded it yourself. Maybe you weren't the best at mixing it, so you got to mix so it at least sounds good in your car with you and your friends when y'all are outside on the beach, whatever the case is.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Vanna Wolf, and I'm a mother of like 5 children, and I create because this is one of the only professions that you can still make money after you die. And what type of impact AI can have on that if you're using AI in your songs, and how you can maximize both, I guess, your creative individual stuff with the other. Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I still think as a creative tool, AI, outside of making covers, which AI is decent at, I think it's still 4 to 5 years away from making good music, in my opinion. But that being said, once it does hit that point, I still think that making good music will require creativity and intention. And it's like any other tool. I mean, right now you can use drum loops that are pre-built into your digital audio workspace. That is, I can see AI snippets being used in the same way. I hope that we don't get to a point where all songs are fully AI generated and that's what consumers want to listen to. That is a risk. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Sometimes starting from scratch stifles progress and creativity. So sometimes putting in that prompt and hitting generate, gives you a jump off, somewhere to start. I know if I give my sister a piece of paper and I say draw, she's gonna scribble because she's 9. But if I give a 28-year-old a piece of paper and say draw, they're gonna be like, what do you want me to draw? So I think it could continue to foster that childlike creativity and wonder and exploration.
And I think your question gets to some really interesting and fun places, because again, if we look at the economics of, certain artists are at a certain level in this economy, I mean, part of the game is if you get 10,000 people that care deeply about you, and they're putting, and you're creating, sort of economic models where they're happy to give you money through different sort of structures that, live on top of streaming, like you can make a living, right? I mean, that's kind of the, and whether it's 5,000 or 50,000. But the idea of really thinking about who is your core community and how do you service them. So what keeps me up at night a little bit is thinking about, so AI, absolutely, right? I mean, so if you have a community of fans that are incredibly passionate, and for some reason you cannot write additional compositions or songs, you've moved on to the next, you're out of commission. Is there a market in 15 years to say, through AI, we can be creating the next generation of these songs, and I still have 5,000 fans that would be willing to put money into something that my heirs are benefiting from? I mean, that's super interesting, and it's, the stuff that, again, I'm more worried about on that tip is, we still have problems licensing for podcasts. We are nowhere near where we need to be, I would suggest, in terms of thinking about VR and AR and those type of experiences, and how we're going to license them and who gets to make those decisions, and again, how are independent artists sort of centered in those conversations. Because I think we know, like Tiny Desk concerts are such a great, huge thing, and they're wonderful, and we all love Tiny Desk, but that's likely, I assume, going to be some sort of VR situation in 7 years, I don't know. So who gets to make that decision? How's that being licensed, and who is sort of representing the interests? So my obsession, which poor Hans has heard for many, many years, is, I think in this country we need to have a fundamental rethink about what is the role of public media, right? So we basically are running our public television, public radio through the lens of legacy terrestrial technologies that are still important in many segments, but are increasingly less important. And so I want to see the conversation really about what is public media, how is that sort of conceptualized for a digital age, and where are those pieces around AI, around VR, around AR, like who are the sort of the public entities that need to be represented in these licensing structures moving forward? Because we know for sure, again, like Live Nation started as Clear Channel, which is a billboard company, right? I mean, we know what these companies are. They're about commodities, they're about audiences, about monetizing audiences, and if they are controlling, we know that they are working very hard to do their job as a publicly traded corporation, right? It's not to say they're bad, it's like literally that's just their job, like maximize revenue. So if we don't have that counterweight in these licensing conversations at the front end, we're going to be left behind.
My hope is that through ethically training AI, we're able to find ways to make sure that however a piece of art was created, no matter what the medium, it can pay the people that it was derived from. So if someone says, make me a song that sounds like the Beatles and Pink, that, if that meshed thing is created and released out into the world and it blows up and, gets all this money, then they'll be able to say, well, this was based on these 2 artists, so it's going to go to whatever that circle was from this song, and whoever was involved in this song, it'll go to those people. So, I mean, if you sold your entire catalog, that surely sucks for whoever's gonna say, make me a Justin Bieber type song, because I know it's gonna happen.
Hello, I'm Jessica. I'm the accessibility coordinator. And so I'm really captured by this, how technology keeps lowering the access barrier. But I don't think that says enough, right? I think it lowers the access barrier to the folks who are privileged first. And I think Youth on Record and lots of folks, we work really hard to lower it to everybody. And so with AI, we need to really look at this place where lowering access in general and equity meet to, to create the world we want and not the world of legacy oppressions. So can you guys talk about that? And yeah, that's all.
Okay, I have some thoughts and then I'll pass it over to you. I think while it's lowering the barrier of entry, I do actually think that especially with AI and where technology is today, that barrier of entry, in my opinion, is extremely low as far as creation. Where I think there needs to be a level setting in the equity piece is education. Because just because I can create a song in 5 minutes and upload it and globally distribute it, I don't know the right ways to monetize it. I don't even know what the income streams are that the royalties are generating. Maybe I don't even know what royalties are. I'm just a creator that is creative and made music. So I think that while the work in technology is continuing to progress and lower the barrier of entry, I think there needs to be a lot more organizations like what you're doing as well, which is where I'll pass it off to you, to level set that education.
Yeah, I agree. I think the barrier to entry has been lowered specifically when it comes to recording and releasing music. But even to get to that point, to make a decision to want to record music, you need to be exposed to music, and that is certainly not equitable across America or the world. And I also think it starts with programs like what Youth on Record does, getting kids in front of instruments. So much of today's conversation has been around digital music, but we got to remember that kids get into music by playing instruments. And I'm a jazz drummer, so like AI will never be able to replace like a good trio set. Not that, kind of off topic, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done across other areas outside of just the recording sector to continue to lower the entry barrier.
I just want to build on Jessica's point. I mean, if you all have a chance, go to the Underground Music Showcase website and read the accessibility plan. It's the best in the country. It's like the work that Youth on Record and Jessica and the team are doing, and Kaylin and others are doing, to basically, advance this conversation and do it in a way that hopefully is replicable, that other festivals can learn from and adapt. And again, it's the best one of the best examples again of why people are in this room and what they're trying to do, which is not around economics and a consumer marketplace. It's about community and justice. And I would go back to what I said earlier about encouraging everybody, if you have bandwidth, to engage in the advocacy conversation, because again, it's not just an economic impact and a business conversation, it's an equity and justice conversation. So as we think about who gets access and even can this festival exist in the future, which I'm sure it will and it should, but who benefits from this, and how do we bring those dollars to the table to understand, the importance of underwriting all these different aspects. So thank you for your work and for the question.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Jeevie's going to bring that microphone over. And this has been a great conversation, so let's keep it going.
Yeah, I was just wondering what y'all think about the future of live music in the next 5 years, with everything considered that we talked about.
I don't know about y'all, but after a week of having nothing but screens of interacting with people, whether that be working from home or just not seeing your friends, maybe only FaceTime, when you do get that interaction, it is very much irreplaceable. I do think that with the barrier of entry and the cost of music, it will continue to be difficult for the average person to be able to have those interactions. So I'm hoping that we can figure out ways to get the artist paid while also making it affordable for fans to have those experiences.
I love that question so much, and I think to a large extent, I think July is exactly right. I mean, I think, if it's a complicated question. I think one way to think about it is, again, what is the distinction between a consumer experience, which is where the industry is with a high ticket price and a big night out, versus a community experience and having the ability to be in these rooms and experience that transcendence. The generational piece of this is that the industry, the live music industry and the independent venue sort of ecosystem, the bill is coming due of resting on my generation's willingness to spend ridiculous amounts of money on alcohol, right? We've allowed the live music industry to be twinned and basically become an alcohol delivery mechanism. And those economics don't work anymore for lots of reasons that go beyond the scope of this panel. And so the conversation, again, what we're trying to do here at UMS, and you all have great venue infrastructure here in the state, more so than in most states that I'm familiar with, is get back to, again, core principles of, like, why do these spaces have to exist? Who needs to be in these rooms? Who needs to be invited to be in these rooms, right? I mean, with pandemic, we lost a generation of young people who actually lost out on that opportunity to know that I can go see a live show, I can go to clubs, I can do this. So again, as music advocates and stakeholders, we're fundamentally, again, rethinking how do we use these spaces, what are they for, how do we build this sort of grassroots up infrastructure and ecosystem to make sure that the music industry can thrive and we can have these experiences that we all so cherish.
I completely agree, and I think one thing that AI won't be able to replace is the experience of seeing an artist live on stage and the connection, the human connection that fans have to their artists. So much of why people listen to music is because they care about the person making that art, and AI won't be able to replace that. I think it's going to be a challenge if AI music becomes a lot more popular. How would you even tour that if there's not a real person behind it, right? And yeah, maybe actors. Hopefully not, but yeah.
Such an interesting question. To take a totally left field approach, my hope of where the live industry is going in the next 5 years is that it becomes a lot more eco-friendly, actually. So totally different take than what we've been talking about, but I think a lot of people are recognizing that live music is not necessarily the most green industry, and there's a lot of advocacy groups and a lot of work being done to continue to make live music the same type of experience without harming our ecosystem quite as much, and I hope that that continues to happen in the next 5 years.
Good point. All right, anything else? That was indeed a great question. Oh, do you have a quick one?
Yeah.
Looking at the phone.
Yeah. Sometimes people misuse AI in every field, but is there a balance with it in the music industry, especially creating a song? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I think AI will be a tool for artists to use like any other tool that we currently use to create music. But again, like I said earlier, I think the biggest risk is that AI is used by those in power to extract more value from the labor of cultural workers.
I also, though, I think, again, this is why I think it's so important to not just be like, so yes, the fear, right, and the concern about how it can break bad and all things that could happen. It also has an opportunity to completely transform the ability for people that don't have the gift to create to have a deeper relationship to music and a deeper exposure. And you think about like video games, like a generation grew up playing Madden football. Like, I'm not a quarterback, but I can feel like I can have a different experience to the game, right? And so the potential of a future where if we do our job right in terms of supporting the core infrastructure and the ecosystem that we need for the people that experience and want to be in music at that level, there may be more people getting into the industry as fans and as stakeholders because they have access to tools that allow them to fundamentally redefine and be that active participant. So I don't think it has to necessarily be black and white, like it's all going to be bad or it's all going to be good, but we do need to have these conversations and guardrails in place.
I like what you said there about being able to play Madden, but you're not a quarterback. And I have my uncles and my cousins, they all play Madden and 2K and all these things, and they have these things called fantasy teams where they simulate the act of the entire sports season. If someone could simulate the career of their favorite artist, or maybe create the album that they want their artist to create, and I don't know, maybe pitch that to them as an option, like, hey, I came up with this cool idea. I think that could also give fans a greater, or just another avenue or ability to connect.
That is a good point. Another invention. Somebody.
Yeah, I need to shut up.
We've heard from these amazing folks a lot of thoughts. In a sense, you were drinking from the fire hose with all of this. It's a crazy world, but you all know how to lead it best. These folks, thank you so much. We give praise for you all. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.